What's up, people? Welcome back. Did you know that in the last few months, Microsoft have released two new functions, Group By and Pivot By? Now, we're going to leave Pivot By for an entire other video. In this lesson, we're just going to focus on Group By. And if you're thinking to yourself, well, what on earth is Group By? Well, it's a way of performing data aggregations within a single formula. Now, if you're even more confused than you were a couple of minutes ago, the easiest thing to do is dive straight into an example. So let's go. Now, we're going to work with a very small data set in this example. I've got some agent IDs. They might be sales agents. I have some cities that they work in, some areas, the revenue and the profit that they've generated. And I'm going to use the group by function to perform some aggregations on this data. So the way that you need to think about this is it's a little bit like a pivot table, but a formula version of a pivot table. And you'll see in the next video that I put out related to Pivot By is basically a pivot table in formula version. Now, the difference between Pivot By and Group By is minimal. In the Pivot By formula, we can aggregate by the rows and the columns, whereas in Group By, we can only aggregate by the rows. Now, if you're still confused, let's just get on with it, shall we? I need to stop talking. All right, let's click in a cell. I'm going to click in this one just here, and we're going to type in equals Group By. Now, remember, this function is only available to Microsoft 365 users. And if you have Microsoft 365 and you find that you can't see this function, then you might need to run a quick update on your system. Now, in its most basic form, this function has three mandatory arguments: row fields, values, and function. The others that you see in those square brackets, those are optional arguments. Now, I am going to show you those so you know what they do, so don't panic. Now, the first argument here is row fields. So for this, I'm going to choose the city range just here. Now, stick with me. We'll go back at the end and we'll understand exactly what we're doing. But let's get something in the cell. So we've got our row fields. What are our values? What do I want to aggregate by? So maybe what I'm trying to do here is basically get an overview of how much profit has been generated by each city. Notice that we have different cities, but they're repeated in column C. So we want to aggregate them together, much like we would in a pivot table. So my values field is going to be the profit. That's what I'm interested in. Comma. The third mandatory function is the type of aggregation method that we want to use. And you can see we have a big long list of them. We have 16 or so in there. So things like sum, average, min, max, you're used to seeing all of those. We also have a new cheeky little aggregation function, and that is %of in there. And I'm going to show you how that works a bit later on. For the time being, let's just stick with something simple. I'm going to go with sum. Let's close the bracket, hit enter, and check out what we get. We now have aggregated totals for each of the cities. This is a unique list of the cities that it's extracted, and it's worked out the sum based on those cities. Also notice that it's added a total row at the bottom, but it doesn't have any header rows up here at the moment. Now, remember that this is a dynamic array formula, so it means that we can't edit it in any of these cells. We must go back to the cell where we first typed in the calculation in order to be able to make any changes. So just remember that. Now, what else could we do up here? Well, I could expand the range. So instead of just having the cities, I might also want to include the areas in this formula. So if we go back up to where we have this first range just here, I could switch that out for both of these columns, press enter, and you can see that it's automatically going to update. Now, if we go back up to our formula and just click at the end of sum and press comma, let's take a look at some of these other additional arguments. Now, notice at the moment I don't have my column headings showing. So this is where we can decide if we want to see those or if we don't. So I'm going to say yes, show them. I'm going to select number 3 and hit enter. And you can see it's going to give me city and area. It doesn't seem to give you column headings for the aggregated revenue. I've tried this a few times and it never gives me that column heading, but it does give me the other two. Let's go back up to the formula again, comma. We can now specify with this argument if we want to display grand totals, subtotals, if we want to turn them off entirely. So we have different options up here. Now I can choose to display just the grand totals and subtotals, grand totals at top, so on and so forth. Now I'm going to say grand totals and subtotals, comma. The next argument is the sort order. So if I want to sort this data set, this output, how do I want to do it? Well, maybe I want to sort it by the profit column, which effectively is column number 3. And that's what this argument needs. It needs what we call an index number. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you want to sort by the profit in descending order, you would need to type in -3. If you wanted ascending order, it would simply be 3, okay? Because you're just choosing the number of the column minus for descending and effectively a plus or a positive value for ascending. So I'm going to put in -3, comma. The last argument is filter array. Remember, these last ones are all optional. So this is where you can specify if you want to exclude something from your results. So maybe I decide that I want to see everything except the results for London. So what I could do here is I could select my filter array, which is going to be the city, and I'm going to say not equal to London. Let's hit enter and see those results. So we should find that we now have our subtotals turned on, which we do. We are organizing our information in descending order. I'm just going to apply some comma formatting style to make that easier to see. And we've excluded London from those results. And the cool thing about group by is that everything updates automatically. So if you were doing a pivot table, for example, if the original source data changes, you have to go back to the pivot table and refresh it to update it. And the cool thing about using group by is that everything automatically updates. So if something was to change over here, so let's change Bristol to Bath and hit enter, you can see it automatically adds Bath into the list just here. Now we could take this a stage further and use conditional formatting to apply some formatting to this output. Because at the moment it doesn't have any formatting applied, it can be quite hard to read. So let's select our dataset, go to conditional formatting, new rule. I'm going to say use a formula to determine which cells to format. Now I'm going to get those column headings to stand out. So what I'm going to say here is, and we're going to only lock the column and not the row because I want this formatting to be able to travel across. If that equals city, then we want to apply, and I'm going to say bold formatting. Click on OK. So it's only going to highlight the heading row because it's the only row that has the word city in it. Now what about the subtotals? Well, with these subtotals, we can see that we have a blank cell in column I for each of these. So we can use that to apply our conditional formatting. So once again, let's go for new rule, use a formula. This time we're going to say if this cell, and we're going to lock the column but not the row, if that equals blank, then we want to apply, I'm going to say bold italic formatting, and I'm going to make the fill a light blue. Let's click on OK, OK again, and there we go, like magic, we have those totals and those subtotals highlighted. So that is a quick run through of the group by function. There are so many different ways that you can use this. And because it's a formula, you can add it into other formulas and nest it with other functions to make it really powerful. Let me know what you think down in the comments. And as always, like, share, all that good stuff. And I will see you guys next time. Bye!